Welcome back to Normalized PTSD. Today we have Outward Bound School. This is an organization that takes veterans out into the wilderness and reconnect with themselves as well as with nature. And today we have Anthony, and he's going to talk about what he's gotten out of the program as well as what he sees veterans get out of it. I enjoyed this chat, and I hope you guys do too. All right. Thank you for joining, Anthony. Just quickly, how did you go from military to an instructor there at Outward Bound?
Thanks, Jonathan. And before I answer that, just wanted to say thanks for having me on your show, and thanks for the work that you're doing out there. I think every every instructor that kind of comes to Outward Bound probably follows a different path. I'm a little bit of the, I guess you'd say, like a non-traditional sort of instructor. Or a lot of our instructors are younger folk. For me, I did a career in the military in U.S. Marine Corp, and I was a student on one of our Outward Bound military veterans courses at one point. And I kind of think of my journey to Outward Bound as a lot like my military one, where I joined the Marine Corps straight out of high school, 17
Mhm.
years old, with the total intention of like 4 years and then like do my, serve my country and then move on. And just sort of, I loved it, loved the culture, loved the Marines, um, and just sort of never left. Spent a whole career there. And so Outward Bound's been a little bit of the same thing. I was a student on a veterans Outward Bound course, like I mentioned, as I was sort of trying to figure out what's next. I was really inspired by my instructors and by the course experience that I had. And mine was in the Florida Everglades canoeing, and it
Wow.
was wild and beautiful and thought provoking. Uh, and then after that, I still didn't go directly to Outward Bound. I left the Marine Corps. I tried to teach eighth grade social studies, which I was doing okay, and I think I could have hung in there, but I was actually quite miserable. I was kind of like, I guess what you might say, I was like failing at the transition from a military to a civilian career, as so many
Right.
other veterans really struggle with. So I was really struggling to just sort of get things straight in my head about what I wanted to do and where my life was going and that sort of stuff. And so I reached back out to Outward Bound again. I told them what was going on. I says, this, I'm not, things aren't quite right. I'm not meeting my goals in education. Um, and I asked them, I said, I'm thinking again about coming back to y'all as an instructor, or like, what do I need to do? And they lined me up with their outdoor. They have this 50-day long outdoor educator course. It's meant to train instructors like me and how to have a career in the outdoors, whether it's with Outward Bound or anybody else. And they helped me out with a little bit of military scholarship. And then this is where it gets parallel to the military career. So I did the kind of unwritten expectation was I would do like a one season sort of like a payback tour for my outdoor education course and my scholarship, and then
Right.
6 years later I still haven't left. So
They can't
yeah,
get rid of you.
it was the same, like really the same thing as the military, like just an amazing culture and community of people who like dedicated and super passionate about what they're doing and the people that they serve. Uh,
Right.
and I really enjoyed, I got a chance to serve veterans on that first summer and was like, boy, like, yeah, this is really it. This is where I'm going, at least for now.
I keep hearing it so often lately. It's just like giving back to a community seems to be just like that's the missing piece for a lot of people. And I love it. I'm glad that you found it. Did you ever find yourself in that eighth grade classroom thinking about Outward Bound?
Um, Sometimes I think one of the things that I saw was, and this is kind of a trademark of the Outward Bound course, is smaller groups. Um, it's basically a squad-sized unit, if we were to put it into military terms. Maximum of 12 participants on a course, a couple of instructors. And I was sitting there in this eighth grade classroom, with it was me, flying solo uh, with 26 kids, all crammed into a space that was like too tight, uh, and it was just like I felt like a platoon commander or a platoon sergeant who has no squad leaders, no fire team
Yeah.
leaders. I was just like, hooking and jabbing on my own. I was just like, this is not sustainable. So I've also, interesting, this is a total sidebar, but I've had the opportunity to teach several, we don't just do veterans courses, I've taught several educators courses for
Hmm.
teachers. Um, so, so one, Outward Bound serves all kinds of people. It's not just about,
Right.
teenagers, but, the piece in there is I now have, I had a lot of respect for teachers before, and now it is like above and beyond what I had before. Like the amount of work and compassion and like service that teachers are doing is, yeah, it's amazing. I know it's a,
It
a bit of a
is.
sidebar, but yeah, I don't want to touch on my brief foray into traditional classroom education without acknowledging that there's people doing great work out there.
Absolutely. I mean, I
Yeah.
was the worst student ever, so it didn't take me long to realize, they went through a lot because I know what I put them through.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think so where that kind of comes in, I guess for me was when I was in that classroom, I was like, I loved some of the stuff I loved most about the military was like just being outside, sleeping under the stars, um, being in the field, whether it's on operations or training or whatever, just kind of like being out there with like me and my Marines doing our thing. Um, and so I was kind of looking like where in the world, like I have an education background I have a degree in education, thanks to the Marine Corp.
Hmm.
And I was just looking for this spot where I could mash those two worlds together. Like, how can I like take my classroom education goals and like combine them with like a field wilderness squad sized unit type setting where um, like we're kind of doing a bit of both. And that's what I found in Outward Bound is that it's not just like a guided program, but Outward Bound is a school, and we're there to teach curriculum. It's really that was really important to me in finding Outward Bound and what
Oh,
they do.
that's awesome. Yeah, we're going to touch on that in just a bit. We're just going to take a step back. For the qualifications, you all have different hierarchies in a sense, right? There's like general instructors as well as the specialty instructors. Can you just speak to that for a bit?
Yeah, yeah, just briefly. I mean, everybody who comes into our program, and we have people coming into the as instructors, they come in from all these different backgrounds and life experiences. So they're bringing that with them, and they may have had some technical skills experience. Like for me, I had a lot of time backpacking, land navigation, like all that kind of stuff. But I'd never been rock climbing, whitewater canoe, kayaking, whatever. So you come in, all instructors come in. You start out as you'll go through some staff training to build a background in the methodology that Outward Bound uses, and then you start your first year as it's called an assistant instructor, working underneath a lead instructor, and then you spend maybe depending on how many courses an assistant instructor uses and how uh, I guess you'd say how aggressive they are at like pursuing professional development and looking after their own, uh, I guess, career and skill set. Then they
Mhm.
like slowly start just like you would in the military, like checking off all of these experiences and skill sets being evaluated by the lead instructors or course directors that you're working for. And eventually
Mhm.
you work up to be an instructor. And then the top of the instructing side is the lead instructor. And then inside of that, instructors can choose to branch off into specializations. So a regular field instructor could also specialize in something like rock climbing or whitewater canoe, or in my particular case, I ended up specializing in coastal kayaking or sea kayaking. Went to a lot of like professional development stuff to build up my certifications and qualifications to lead those kind of trips.
Awesome. So working with veterans, what is that like? Did you ever find that there's any preconceived notions when working with veterans, whether it be towards you all or, vice versa?
Yeah, there's some of that. I would say first, like the number one thing off the bat, though, is that working with veterans is like just an amazing experience. It's a lot of fun because you get to, like, even for me as an instructor, like get to kind of like get back into that world a little bit of, the kind of playful military banter that goes back and forth between the different branches of service or different experiences or whatever.
I was about to say, you being an officer, I'm sure you don't get anything for that.
Oh no, I hardly ever get rest. But there's also that saying, if they're not giving you trouble, they probably just don't care about you at all.
Right.
So I always take it as like, oh, maybe I'm okay. Yeah, I try to use my prior enlisted life as street cred, but it only gets me so far. Yeah, and working with the military. For a lot of our instructors, so we do have a fair amount of outward bound instructors who have a military background, but a lot of them don't. Like my instructors on my veterans course, where I was a student, neither of them had any military experience, and frankly, that was important to me because military students, participants from the military coming out onto our courses have a lot of, like, every student's coming in with their own sort of goals and aspirations and what they're trying to get out of the course. And I was really struggling to kind of transition into the civilian world after 26 years in the military from age 17. So I was actually excited to interact with civilian instructors and sort of like make that transition a little smoother, both in my veterans course and when I did the educators course. But yeah, one of the things that we're trying to do, like we're trying to create a space where the veterans can just have their own course, where they're building up camaraderie and teamwork. And, some folks might end up opening up a little bit to each other. And it can be challenging when there's a couple of people there who have no military experience, like the outward bound instructors. So right off the bat, one of the biggest things that we're trying to do is just develop rapport and develop communication and really just develop trust between each other. Because you got veterans coming in who are looking at outward bound, and for whatever reason, or their knowledge of like other people in the outdoor industry might be that they're like they just have a preconceived notion about what we are. I don't know. You hear, I don't want to use the stereotypes too much, but yeah, right. You hear little things like kind of like hippy dippy or granola or whatever, which like there's so many different people in Outward Bound that doesn't always apply. But, and then from the veterans, and then Outward Bound staff, like we might have, we're, a lot of our Outward Bound staff are civilian and don't have a lot of knowledge in the military and might have preconceived notions about who our veterans are. And so what we're trying to do is build trust and help each other get to, like, so we spend a lot of time early on course, just kind of like getting to know each other and talking to everybody and building that rapport. And also just helping the communication side.
Right.
It's really, really important for us early on course.
So we'll dive into that one. So the Outward Bound Veteran Program, what's that entail? Like you mentioned a curriculum.
Yeah. I think the very first thing I would say is in a snapshot, the Outward Bound schools themselves, in a way, is a veteran school at its root history. Like the
Mhm.
Outward Bound itself was born during World War II with the intention to help uh, young sailors, merchant marines build resilience so that they could better withstand attacks by German U-boats at sea on the open seas during World War II. Like that was our birthplace as a school. Um,
Wow.
and so in a lot of ways, it's like this has always been a program about like that has roots in military service. And a lot of the early founders of Outward Bound were military people. Um, and then short history, 1970s, we had so many Vietnam veterans were coming back from the war without access to the kind of services that we see today. And people up in at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire were doing a lot of sort of experimenting or theorizing about the therapeutic value of the wilderness. And they connected with Outward Bound, with actually an intricate player, and that was the former commander of Special Forces in Vietnam, a gentleman named Colonel Bob Rowe. Together, they started up the Outward Bound Veterans Program, which is aimed at helping military members make the transition from their military combat experience back to civilian life. And so, yes, there is like a PTSD linkage where like a lot of early veterans in the program were struggling with PTSD, and a lot of veterans who come to us may have PTSD, but ultimately the
Mhm.
program is not. You don't have to have PTSD to come to us. It's more about the transition, and life is full of all kinds of transitions. So, it can be a transition immediately out of the military, or it could be one, you know, 20 years after the military, if you're, somebody's still struggling or just trying to recapture a little bit of that fire. That's what the veterans program is all about.
Right. I've seen a pretty common theme. Something that really helps is learning new skills. Uh, you know, Doing something a bit challenging, and that's definitely what you guys do there. What kind of skills do you teach? I know you
Yeah,
mentioned on a previous call, like goal setting, transference,
sure.
focusing on simplifying life.
Yeah, and I realized I didn't really touch too much on curriculum, so I'll kind of use that as a segue as well. So across the country, all these different Outward Bound schools, the veterans curriculum is fairly, like instructors have a lot of latitude to run the course the way they see fit. But there's some consistencies. Like all of our veterans courses are 6 days long, and throughout those 6 days, what we're doing in terms of a skill is that we're using a technical skill area and a very specific environmental area. We're using those technical skills to achieve non-technical outcomes. So we're using something like a backpacking expedition or rock climbing or um, whitewater rafting or dog sledding. Like we're using these highly technical skills to then achieve these non-technical outcomes. And some of those non-technical outcomes are ones that you talked about. It could be helping an individual set goals for their life after course. Um, we're talking to people about just sort of untethering themselves from all the distractions of life, like cell phones and jobs and obligations and these things, just for the briefest of periods. The sort of disconnect. So this term disconnect, we hear that so often of like veterans coming in and I just want to disconnect, but it's not disconnecting in and of itself. It's like disconnecting for a purpose, like, and that really depends on the individual. They want to work on a goal. They want to simplify their life. They want to recapture their joy for being in the outdoors. They weren't. A lot of folks will come in wanting to work on communication skills or maybe leadership. Like we think about, I've often seen military members coming in, and you think military and leadership go hand in hand, and this was the case for me, was like, my military leadership style was not working in the civilian world. So in a
Mhm.
lot of ways, I was using my Outward Bound course to sort of redefine how I worked as a leader, um, to because it like less hierarchical and more collaborative, more bottom up, things like that.
Right.
So leadership, communication, goal setting, transferring something that you learned on a technical skill to life outside. Uh, that could be like how we, another, this sounds like a funny thing to work on, but helping yourself. Um,
Mhm.
that is one of the biggest skills that I've seen with military veterans is like, it's absolutely critical in the military of, the mission comes first. My Marines come first. I'm as a leader, I'm the last one, but we really, so we see, I've seen it play out on course so many times where we'll put somebody in a leadership position, and or not just a leadership position, but they're this part of the team, and they kind of like they neglect to take care of themselves, or they don't even advocate for their own personal needs. And it could be something as simple as we're on a backpacking course, the pace is way too fast, but I won't advocate for myself because the
Mhm.
team comes first. And so what we're teaching people, that's an example of that technical transference, is like, no, listen, the team needs to stay together. We need you to advocate for your personal needs, to talk about pace setting or something else, or you're like, where are you physically in this moment? If you're not 100% right now, the team needs to know so that you can, and that advocating for yourself gets you the support that you need. So you take that, that's what we're talking about, transference. Like veterans learning to advocate for themselves to get the support that they need in the civilian world.
Yeah, that translates so well. I feel like a lot of the veterans and military get into the military to help others, to put others before themselves. And I think it's really important to prioritize yourself. I didn't realize it until much later in life that putting yourself first, whether it's mental, physical, and making sure you're the best version of yourself makes you be the best version for other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, it plays out at home too. Like we think about a lot of our veterans that come on course, that life has, they've moved on from the military and they have all these life things going on. Um, but if, so maybe they're a parent or a husband, wife, spouse, partner, and if they don't take care of themselves, how are they going to take care of their family? How are they going to
Right.
take care of their colleagues? Uh, yeah, so it's really important.
You spoke to disconnecting. Do you ever see any struggles with anyone trying to put that phone away while they're out there in the wilderness?
Well, we help them out a lot with that.
Right.
At the start of the course, we show up with a bag and say, "Put your phone in the bag."
Do you see anyone going through the withdrawals, the shakes? Like,
No, it's so funny. Like, there's always like that last minute, like, oh, let me get out one more text message, one quick call. They're like, yeah, no problem. And then and it's so funny by the end of course, this is interesting because it happens. I've even seen this happening with teenagers who we think of that, the phone's just like literally glued to their head. And it's like I've seen this with veterans and teenagers where at the very end of their course, they're like, hey, we're going to turn your phones back over to you. I've seen veterans take their phone, not even turn it on, throw it in the duffel bag, and just say like, "Yeah, I'll look at that thing later."
right? No,
It's
I
so cool.
love it.
Yeah,
I have to like
yeah,
I have addictive personality in general, but I have a little box, and that's where I put my phone because it extends the entire day. Like I just feel like it's such a waste.
yeah. Yeah, and what we find, like we like disconnecting from technology, it's like disconnect to connect. Like you're disconnecting
Right.
from whether it's technology or other like life obligation stuff or normal patterns and routines. We talked a lot about pattern interrupt.
Hmm.
Um, is you're disconnecting from whatever that other pattern is, and it's allowing you to reconnect. So like you're reconnecting with other people who have shared the same experiences of you, such as combat, um, or just connecting with yourself and
Hmm.
what you want out of life. But the other piece that we're also connecting with is nature, and the outdoors and the wilderness. And there's two aspects to that. One is that there's a lot of research out there, and it's also still really hard to quantify, but there is this known the therapeutic value of outdoor experience. And that's like whether that's in your own city park, just walking around, touching a tree, or spending a week in the Everglades or something. Like there is a therapeutic value to just being outdoors, and that's what they were finding. That's what those Dartmouth College
Mhm.
professors were experimenting with or figuring out when they partnered with the VA and with PTSD or victims of traumatic experiences and war. That's what they were figuring out was the therapeutic value of the wilderness. And then
Yeah.
the other like little piece I might mention in terms of connection is like we also talk a lot about connecting to the country that you swore to defend. So, veterans, we swore to defend our country, and so we see it as part of our mission is to just show the veterans a piece of that country that they swore to defend.
Hmm.
By taking them deep into the backcountry of a national park, uh, and showing them, the majesty and beauty of their country.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love outdoors, and it really worked for me. And I love the stories. So on the stories, I was going to ask you, do you have any notable success stories that stand out to you?
Yeah, there's always it's funny. The I have to be honest and say I've done so many courses that oftentimes the names kind of fade or just people kind of start blending together. But there's a few just sort of examples of things that have happened repeatedly. One is seeing people, in the military, we connect with people who we're serving with in units, and we'll spend years with people. We'll go through some really challenging times together, but then what I've just my own personal experience is sort of drifting away from those connections over the years. Um, but then we'll see veterans doing that. They've, kind of like lost connection with a lot of the people they served with, but then they come out onto this outward bound course. They spend 6 days in the woods with people. And I've seen some people end up in these like lifelong, if it's not a deep friendship, it's just like a really cool connection. So I'm on a couple of email or text chains that started right after a course ended.
Yeah.
And it's been really cool to watching these veterans like continue to interact with each other and sharing their lives with each other after course of like, hey, like I'm going on, like I had on one kind of text chain on this, one of the students that was on my course was talking about at the end of their course where they wanted to just explore all around America and spend more time outside.
Mm.
And now I'm on this text chain where every month or so, like I get pop-ups of like these different pictures of all these beautiful places that person's going to.
Oh, that's so cool.
I think another one that I would highlight as a bit of a success story was I had a I had a gentleman on a course who was a little similar to me. I did a career in the military. Him on the enlisted side. I think he was first sergeant or sergeant major. We don't use ranks on our courses, so I often like just sort of forget who everybody
Hmm.
is. It's just John and Jill and Bob. The
Hmm.
and Anyway, this gentleman, I had the rare opportunity with him and one other student. I very rarely get to meet my students again after course, but one of the benefits of our program is a student who's done a program with us can, after I believe it's 1 year or two, the website has all the details, but a student can do a second course with us as long as there's space available and somebody who's trying to do their first course isn't getting bumped. And so it is turning into a little bit of a long story. But anyway, I'm out in the Everglades on a course for just regular civilian 30 years old and older adults sea kayaking. And a veterans crew was out at the same time, and they came paddling up to our island. And like out of the canoes come these two guys who had been with me. One of them had been with me on an Outer Banks sea kayak course, and one of them had been with me on a mountains backpacking course. And aside from the hysterical, like running through the water and hugging each other, aside from that one, something that stuck to me as like a success was the one gentleman telling me, he told me, he says, you know what, when we were on course, this is the guy that was, career military senior enlisted, and he says, I didn't get what you were doing while we were on course. That I didn't get it, like all the goal setting and the communication and opening up and those sorts of things. He said, I didn't get it. He said, I thought I was just there for, like a wilderness trip. And
Right.
he said, and he told me that, and this is common, is like 6 months after his course had ended, he said he sort of woke up one day and it was like, oh, that's why they were doing that. Like it just sort of
Light
all
bulb.
like, yeah, it was just like this light bulb came on for him, and like in a flash, just was like, now I get it. Now I get it. And he was like, and that inspired him to come out and do another course with us. And yeah, it was really awesome to hear that story from him.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I think
S-
it goes to, like, if I could make one more point on that, it goes
yeah,
to this
absolutely.
idea that like military veterans or people of all ages can come to Outward Bound, and we're not trying to make like these crazy transformational changes in 6 days. We're just trying to help people maybe plant a couple of seeds, and we
Hmm.
very rarely get to see them grow, but we do hope that they grow for our veterans and our students. And yeah, so it's like you're planting a seed or an idea and hope it takes root.
And then you teach them how to water it, and it's their
Yeah,
responsibility to
yeah,
water that seed to make it grow. I love
yeah,
it.
for sure.
On a personal level, what do you get out of helping others? Like,
Hmm.
how does it help you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for I think for me, the biggest thing is it's just service. Is It's always been extremely important to me. Like that was the reason that I joined the military in the first place, was aside from I didn't have any money for college, but I joined, that was there. But there's lots of places to get money for college. I also had like this, I don't know where it came from really, because both of my parents were non-military, and they grew up during the late 60s and 70s, or they're like college and early work experience years were in the late 60s and 70s. They're pretty bad vibe around the military service. And so I don't know where this really came from, but it's just been something that's really important to me my whole life, is just serving other people.
Hmm.
I guess it's like a need that I have, so to speak. And um, so it gives me a lot of pride. I like seeing other people's, like living through other people's growth. And I think that holds true for a lot of Outward Bound instructors.
Hmm.
Just kind of like the joke in the military. We don't really do this for the pay.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we're doing it. You do this kind of work for something else inside of you. Um, the sense of, I also miss like that sense of camaraderie with the military, with my brothers and sisters in the military. And so um, I mentioned that, as a student, you can come on a couple of Outward Bound courses and we pay for everything.
Hmm.
Um, but after a while, if you just keep trying to take more courses, we're going to say, well, maybe you should just come work for us. But that's happened to a couple of friends of mine at Outward Bound.
I
So
bet.
I think ultimately it's about serving others. And Outward Bound is not the only place that I scratch that itch. I have association with the Sierra Club. which
Hmm.
do I do youth I volunteer to do youth outings with the Sierra Club to help expose young people to the outdoors.
Hmm.
Um, there's just like a lot of places, and I guess the other part of service is just education. Like that was another theme. My mother's an educator, and uh, it was just really important to me to just to help other people learn. So yeah, that's the itch that I'm scratching when I keep doing these.
I think your path's a little bit better than most. I'd switch my corporate desk job for your job any day.
I hear that so often. Like, wow, this is amazing. And I've seen that play out on course more than once, where somebody kind of follows a similar path to me. Even if it's not outward bound, I've seen students come on veterans courses and kind of commit themselves to, uh, if not a outdoor experiential education kind of life, just committing themselves to a type of work and life that sort of sets them free or helps them meet
Hmm.
personal needs instead of just a paycheck.
Yep. Uh, the process. How does one get started? Say they want to be a student, go on one of these
Mhm.
courses.
Yeah. So our courses are pretty high demand right now. There's a lot of people trying to get out, and us, just like everybody, we're struggling a little bit to find um, people who are interested in instructing. So I'm going to put in the shameless plug of, if
Hmm.
somebody listening out there is interested in being an outward bound instructor, that um, don't be intimidated and check us out. Um, we are hiring. That said, part of the challenge that we're facing is, we have the funding to provide these courses to veterans, but the courses are really high demand, and we are not always able to offer as many courses as there are veterans who want to come on course. So the way it works is, on our website, that's outwardbound.org. There's a drop down menu to find veterans courses, and you find a veteran will find a course that they are interested in, um, meaning like a technical skill area, hopefully something that's outside their comfort zone, and not something they've really done before. And they'll just go through, and there's a button there that says sign up or apply, and they'll do that. I would say like something something that's important to know is that a lot of times our course postings will drop onto the website right around some kind of a big holiday or something, like no, on Veterans Day we'll drop a bunch of courses. On July 4th we drop a bunch of courses, um, things like that. So we're typically so you kind of have to watch the website because the courses fill up pretty quick. um, and then from there, our student services sections will work with the veteran to get them signed up, get them registered for their course. If they can't fit on the course, one of two things will happen. They can either go onto a waiting list for that specific course, or the student services folks at Outward Bound will say, hey, we couldn't get you onto uh, where Everglades canoeing, but we've got this sailing course that you might find interesting, things
Hmm.
like that. So the student services folks are working with the veteran to get them signed up. The other thing I would say is, like, some students, um, there is a waiting list for our courses,
Yeah.
but every single course that I've ever run had at least 2 or 3 students who came off of the waiting list, because our veterans, they have all their life and obligations, and sometimes those
Hmm.
things pop up at short notice and they have to drop off a course. I've had students who were showing up on course after, they probably had more flexibility than most of us, but they got wait list notice like 24 hours out, and they're like, yeah, sure, I'll do it, and they did it. I would also say that, yeah. So go on the website, finding a course that sounds appealing to you, applying for it, and if you're on the wait list, don't stress about the wait list. Just
Hmm.
hang in there. We'll get you. We'll find a course for you.
That's awesome. You mentioned becoming an instructor. It made me think, what are your hours like? Like,
Yeah.
what's that mean?
So instructors for Outward Bound are essentially like contract workers. That's the best way that we can compare it. So at the beginning or prior to the beginning of each season, we fill out a survey of the kind of coursework we're interested in, and then the different schools we work for are matching that up. Like the needs of the school are matched up with the instructor's interests, um, and they come up with a work contract, like a work agreement, saying, "Hey, can you work? We've got this course and this and this. Like, are you willing to do those?" And it's a little bit of a negotiation process, but ultimately you sign the contract to work for a season.
Hmm.
And then that cycle just repeats itself. So we're essentially seasonal contract workers. Uh,
So how often a week would you work? Like, I imagine you're
oh
not
yeah,
always out on a trail every day.
yeah. No, that's not the case. So yeah, so to clarify, like seasonal, what I mean by seasonal contract, so you're signed up for a course. It depends on the type of the course and the school that you're at, but you might have 2 or 3 days of pre-course preparations, which are done just you're living on the base camp, living in base camp facilities, and so part of your income is food and lodging while
Mhm.
you're on contract. And so you've got like 2 or 3 days of preparation on the base camp, living there with your colleagues. And then once you're on course, you are in the field with your students.
Mhm.
Um, so hours are, I mean, you're essentially in the field the whole
Right.
time. So it's
Mhm.
you're either, I mean, and there's just like one of the awesome things, I kind of alluded to it with my description of that eighth grade classroom where it was just me and 26 kids. But like this, it's like a smaller group, 12 students, and then either a pair of instructors or a trio of
Mhm.
instructors. And so you're working collaboratively with your co-instructors to essentially like take turns and share voices on the course. So you get your fair share of downtime to rest and recover and always stay fresh.
That's awesome.
But yes, you are like like ultimately you're in, if your students are in the field, you're in the field with them the entire time. Yeah, and the
What
courses, like I said, veterans courses are 6 days, but instructors also, like instructors find their way in the organization and they work all kinds of longer course programs, or some of our instructors will even progress into like a little bit more administrative role, like course directing or being in charge of a base camp or the logistics or working at our uh, our version of a headquarters, things like that.
So we're talking specifically to the veterans program, but you all do provide programs for people that aren't veterans.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I often think about this, like, veterans have kids too, and it's really
Yep.
cool. I've had students on course who had a background as I've never had a student on one of my courses whose parent also did a veterans course. Actually, you know what? I take that back. Um, I have I've had youth on courses whose parents had done Outward Bound earlier in their lives and that found it important and wanted to share it. And then I've also had a veteran on one of my courses whose um, their kid, teenager, had done a course, and then this woman was just like, she was so inspired by her kids' Outward Bound course that she reached out to us, and of course we were like, well, you're a veteran, why don't you just come for free? So that was pretty cool. I've had husband and wife not on the same course, but I've had one like a military, I forget what they call it in the military, like a where the husband and wife are both serving. Anyway, I had like the wife on a backpacking course, and then a few months later, her husband was on a sea kayaking course with me. So I got to meet both of them. But yes, Outward Bound serves a huge huge range of populations. We work with youth ages 14 to 18 in open enrollment courses. We work with 18 and older adults. I just got back from a course in Panama, gap semester experience for 18 and up adults. We have our veterans courses. We have longer outdoor educator courses for people going after a career in outdoors. We have courses for for adults age 30 and over. We do group contract. That's one thing I should point out, because there might be some veterans organizations out there listening, is that we also do group programs where established groups. So we have had military organizations come out and do a course with us where they are, like, one that sticks out to me is an organization called 23rd Veteran, who is really focused on particularly preventing that military veterans suicide, but they also work on PTSD and life goal setting and those kinds of things. We've had groups where, like, special operations community, like intact groups. I don't want to call it a reunion, but it's a group of military service members who served together in a particular conflict, and then they came together to us, like, in a outward bound experience for 6 days. So service members from a particular unit have come to us. Things like that. So it's not just, so most of our veterans courses are open enrollment, but we also serve we would call it like an intact group, or an organizational group that would contract with us to do a course for them. And those are really powerful too. Those have been some of my most interesting courses.
I bet it would be pretty awesome to see that in action.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. These guys, especially, like, seeing these ladies and gentlemen, like, seeing each other again. Like, a lot of them may not have seen themselves and seen each other in 10 years since they were serving in combat together.
Mm-hmm.
And then seeing them not just come back together and see each other for the first time, but seeing each other in, like, just a wild and beautiful place like the Everglades or the Blue Ridge Mountains or something like that.
It reminds me of a friend I saw, Hamilton, and I hadn't seen him in, had been 10 years. And it was not in a beautiful place like that. It was in Baghdad, Iraq, and we were both over there as contractors, but still that reconnection that's one of my favorite things. For sure. If we can't be an instructor, but we want to help, how does one help Outward Bound?
Yeah, there's so many different ways. Probably one of the most simple ways is just spreading the word about what we in our school do for military veterans and other folks. And if you know somebody out there who could benefit from one of our courses, then, point him in our direction. I've had a lot of, there may be counselors out there listening to your program who are working with veterans, and send them in our direction.
Mm-hmm.
We are a nonprofit organization and always have been. And so we rely on the donations of sponsors. And there's a link right on the outwardbound.org website, top right corner, big yellow button says donate. So that's another way that's encouraged, and that can just be small donations. And then we have corporate sponsors who donate millions of dollars. We have other nonprofits. So interestingly, the Sierra Club has its own military veterans and families program. And that was one of the real, like, rekindling starts of the Outward Bound Veterans program. It was kind of dormant after a while, in between Vietnam and the current conflicts, Iraq and Afghanistan. So in 2007, in a partnership with the Sierra Club, we received a huge donation to kind of restart the program. So we get donations from a lot of different sources. And then I guess the third way I would I would suggest is just connecting with Outward Bound. We get a lot of connection through alumni who come back and visit our base camps and maybe provide a little bit of community service towards us. Alumni of our programs are always welcome at our base camps, so they can stop in and share a meal, and we might put them to work for a little bit.
Be rude not to.
And then sit around the campfire and talk about life.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
All right, Anthony, in closing, is there anything that you'd like to touch on that we may have missed?
No, I feel like we've covered it. I think what I would just bring it back to is that two things. One, if you're a veteran out there, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself and get what you need out of life, and whether that's an amazing adventure or just some help reconnecting, we're there for you. And the other one is I want to thank you, Jonathan, for your service and for the service you're providing with the podcast. And thank you to all of our veterans out there.
And with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much, Anthony. And thank you, veterans, for everything you did for us. All right. I really enjoyed that chat with Anthony. He's really fun to talk to, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Yeah, that's it. Chat with you guys soon.